Good afternoon, everyone. It is Wednesday, January 26th, and how the heck is it the end of January already at 3 o'clock p.m.? And that means it is time for Women in Business. And yes, I do understand how time works. It just seems to be going much too fast lately. And that makes me feel like I'm 112 when I say that. But it really does seem like, how the heck are we at the end of January already? It seems like it was just, March of 2021, like about 5 minutes ago. But anyway, that's not the speed of time and how time flies is not what we're here to talk about today. We are here to talk about grit or perseverance or stick-to-itiveness or whatever you want to call it. And the two sides of the coin when it comes to this trait in people. There obviously are good things about having grit and having perseverance and sticking to things. There are also bad things. And sometimes it's hard to know when you need to cash in your chips and move on to the next thing. So this was suggested to me by Lisa Shaw, this topic. Thank you, Lisa. I appreciate the suggestion. And when I started doing research, it really, really interested me in how this all works. So let's start with why, first of all, perseverance and grit, or whatever you want to call it, is a good thing. There have been numerous studies done that say that people who persevere, people that have the ability to stick to a task and definitely stick to a task when they're faced with obstacles, that's an indicator of success in almost every area of your life, whether you want to win a spelling bee, whether you want to go to West Point, whether you want to start a business, whatever it is. If you have that ability, indicators are that you're going to be more successful. It also says that there have also been studies that have found that people who are able to treat challenges and limitations as opportunities instead of barriers tend to do better too. So people who make an effort to overcome a personal disability they have, or who make an effort to do as much as they can do with the limitations that they face, are going to have just really a better time in life. And they'll also probably develop a larger and wider skill set. So having grit has a lot of important elements to it. And another one that really comes to mind is for a lot of people, especially like people who are in the arts, actors or directors or writers or whoever, you may have to persist through a lot of time when people are telling you you're not right for the part, we don't like your work, we don't want to publish you, whatever it is. But there was a study done of like, I'm trying to remember the number. I think it was like 29,000 people who were in the arts, actors, directors, that sort of thing. And the study showed that overwhelmingly, most of them has had a period in their career where they became very popular. Their work was celebrated and people wanted to watch them and people wanted to see what they were doing. But there was no predictability as to when that hot period, so to speak, happened. So you could hit it big right out of the gate with the first thing you did. You could hit it big 15 years into your career. You didn't know. And the only way that you could get to the period where you were very popular and celebrated was to persevere through all the years when you were waiting tables at a restaurant and going to auditions and hoping for an off-Broadway gig or whatever it was. So there's no predictability to it. But for the people who stuck it out, most of them, the majority of them, had a period where they did really well. Now, the thing is, once you stick it out and have your hot period, once that period's over, it's not likely you're going to get a second one. So again, even here, there's a little bit of a hook to it. It's like you got to stick to it so you can get to the part that's really good. But once that good part is over or cools down or whatever you want to call it, then you probably won't get a second hot period, so to speak. So perseverance is a double-edged sword in a lot of cases. And I want to just say hello to a few people as soon as I can get this notification that just came up out of the way. Hi, Cindy, who apparently is going to go and talk to a customer, but thank you for being here. Wendy says, my husband calls it stubborn. A lot of people do. Belligerence, maybe. Belligerence is a little bit different thing, I think. And hello, Tanya. Thank you for being here. And I think before we start talking about when grit can become a problem or can cause you problems in your life, when stick-to-itiveness and perseverance can maybe be fetishized to the point that it doesn't work for you anymore. Carolyn, you just made me laugh. My hot period might be after death, artists. This is true. Van Gogh is a very good example of that. He was not very popular when he was alive. Now he's huge, but it had to wait until he died, which is kind of a bummer when you think about it. So I don't know how hopeful that is. When you're not here anymore to enjoy it, it's not nearly as much fun. Reminds me of the Doctor Who episode where the doctor and I think it was Amy Pond took Van Gogh to see an exhibit of his work, which is a great Doctor Who episode if you like Doctor Who. But anyway, getting back to what I was talking about. Sorry, my brain is segueing all over the place today, so you're just going to have to deal with that. But where perseverance comes from, our brains are hardwired to persevere. A lot of it comes from our really, really ancient ancestors, the Paleolithic guys, the guys who lived in caves and went after animals with spears. And the reason that it's hardwired into us is because if those guys didn't persevere against challenges that were primarily physical challenges, we have to walk this really long way to get to the better hunting grounds. We have to stay on our feet and keep moving for a couple days to try to trap these animals so we can eat. We have to spend a lot of time learning how to throw this spear so we can bring these animals down. If you were the caveman who went, you know what, this is too hard, I don't want to do it, and hung out in your cave, then you didn't get to eat. You starved. You didn't get the benefits of the food and the vegetation or whatever it was that you needed. So we're hardwired to persevere because our Paleolithic, Neanderthal, whatever you want to call them, ancestors had to, because everything was hard. So you had to be hardwired to keep trying, or you would starve to death and you would fail and we all would have died out and there would not be any humans. So that's really one of the reasons that we fetishize keeping going despite all the odds as much as we do. It's hardwired into our brains. There were a couple of studies done that I think are really interesting. And one of them, I'm going to put it up here because it was a study that B.F. Skinner did. And it was about intermittent reinforcement. And this is another reason why it's sometimes hard to quit for us. It is within our nature to keep going if sometimes we get reinforcement that what we're trying to achieve can happen. Now, the study B.F. Skinner did, he did with rats, and it was with rats who would get treats. So the rat would go up and push a lever, and sometimes they would get a treat, and sometimes they wouldn't. And there were a couple of experiments. In one experiment, they always got a treat. In the other experiment, they never got a treat. And then there was the experiment where only sometimes they got a treat. What they found is the rats that got rewarded all the time, or the rats that never got rewarded, lost interest far earlier than the rats that only got rewarded sometimes. Because apparently in rat brains, just like in human brains, there is this little something, voice, trait, thought, whatever, that says, maybe next time it'll work. Maybe next time it'll work. So you keep pushing the lever, even though odds are you're not going to get a treat, because the last time you pushed the lever, maybe you did get a treat. So it's the same thing. Think of it as you have a job you don't like, but every once in a while your boss is nice to you. Or you're in a relationship that isn't going well, but every once in a while the person that you're with does something that you want them to do, or takes you out for a nice dinner, or says something loving to you, or whatever it is. So you thrive on those little bits of positivity instead of realizing that, hey, this isn't working out the way I want it to. You tend to cling to those. It's like your life raft of hope. You're clinging to those little bits of, look, this good thing happened. I know it did happen. Possibly it can happen again. Instead of realizing that one good thing does not a good relationship or a good job or a good, boss employee relationship or whatever it is make. And that's intermittent reinforcement. And that's from an experiment that B.F. Skinner did. Another reason that we tend to hold on to things maybe longer than we should is something called the sunk cost fallacy. And I'm throwing a lot of terms at you here. Basically, what this means is when we're involved in something and we're realizing it's not going well, it's not for us, it's probably not going to work out, we're not enjoying it, we're not, it's painful to be involved in, whatever it is, you start adding up all the time you've spent on whatever it is. I've been at this job 5 years. I've been in this relationship 3 years, whatever it is. And you don't want to lose the time you've already invested. So you focus on that, and you focus on reasons why you should stay and try to make it work, because I've already spent all this time, because I have so much invested in this person, because I've spent 5 years learning how to do this job. How can I leave now? And what you're doing is focusing on time that you're not going to get back either way. If you leave or don't leave, that time's gone. It doesn't matter. And if the situation isn't working for you, then continuing in it isn't going to get you back any of the time you've already lost. It's just going to make you lose more time. So instead of concentrating on the fact that you've already invested a lot of time and effort into whatever this thing is, you need to look at it from the perspective of, what could I do if I wasn't doing this? What would be the benefits of not doing this? Because whatever time you've already spent, that's gone. It's gone no matter what you do. It's gone if you stay for 20 years. It's gone if you leave tomorrow. So you need to be aware that you can't use that as part of your decision-making process, because that time's gone. So whatever time and effort you put in, that's gone. It's done. You can't make it be something other than what it is. The only thing you can look at is, how much benefit to me will there be to losing more time and effort to try to make this work? And that's a hard calculation. And I get that, because our instinct is to say, if you've already put effort into something, your instinct is to double down on that effort, because you want to make it work, because you've already spent time and effort. But the reality of the situation is, if it's not working, more time and effort most likely isn't going to make it work any better. So let's see. Carolyn, my husband is well aware I need treats. So we all need treats. And, I forgot what the name of it was now. The intermittent reinforcement. I couldn't remember the second word. The intermittent reinforcement thing, there's hard science behind that we do work well for rewards, and we do, as human beings, like rewards. But what's funny is that we will keep working at situations that don't really give us what we need or suit us well if we're intermittently rewarded, which is the part that I think is really funny. Is it's like if somebody's nice to you, and I gotta say, this really resonated with me because I'll tell you a little story of my own experience with grit and determination and stick-to-itiveness. When I was younger, and we're talking early 20s probably, I had the worst taste in men you have ever seen. I was going to save all the hurt men in the world, and I was going to be the best girlfriend ever, and they were going to love me. And I tended to be attracted to guys who treated me badly and didn't really care about me or weren't really interested in me, but didn't have anything better going at the moment. So, hey, why not hang out with you? Yes, there's a lot of commentary we could make on my self-esteem and all that. But what I learned and what I now understand about that time in my life is that I kept clinging to these relationships and surviving on any scrap of kindness that would be allocated to me and taking that as, oh, this is going to work. I'm going to do this. And there was a lot of belief in my ability to change other people. And the one thing that I think pretty much anybody who's reasonably healthy or had therapy knows is that you can't change other people. You can't make other people behave toward you in a way that they're not inclined to do on their own. If somebody is a shit person, excuse my language, but if they are, they're going to be a shit person regardless of what you do. That's just how it is. So I look back now and I think, man, I wasted so much time on these people who first basically had no interest in me and second didn't care about me at all. But I was so sure that if I just stuck it out and I just, gave it my all, I was going to make these relationships work. Spoiler alert, never did. So what do we learn from this experience? Well, what we learn is, first of all, good self-esteem is a very important thing. And if you have issues in that area, get therapy, get help, figure out your boundaries, all that kind of stuff. That's important. The other thing is that I also had been fed all the romance novels, all the rom-coms, all the stuff where, the guy's not interested or he's kind of a jerk. And then it turns out that he's tortured or whatever it is. And the love of a good woman is going to make everything better. And that's fun to read about. It's great to watch on the screen when they are very pretty people being happy. Doesn't necessarily work out in real life. So that's something you need to be aware of. Another example of this that I think is interesting, and this is one that I hadn't thought of before, but there was someone who looked at, a scientist, I'm assuming, who looked at minor league baseball players. And they did some research and they figured out that if you're a minor league baseball player, there is an 11% chance, 11%, that you will be called up to the major leagues. Now, you got to figure how many minor league baseball players there are. 11% is not a huge percentage. So there's 89% of the people that are currently or have played minor league baseball who will never, ever get called up to the majors. And let's not even go into, if you get called up to the majors, the people who actually end up staying and making a lot of money and becoming stars. So we're just talking about if you're in the minor league, there is an 11% chance that you will get a chance to go to a major league team. Yet there are people who stuck through all the years of practice, who were the best at their high school or college, who are, reasonably good athletes, who will languish in the minor leagues for years and years and years, trying to get this shot that only has an 11% chance of happening. Now, you can think of this two ways. One way you can look at this and you can think, well, isn't that awesome that all these people are following their dream? And following your dream is important and you should follow your dream. And these guys are getting a shot at it. But the reality of the situation is there's an 11% chance that you're actually going to get to the majors. And if you're in the minors, it's an uncertain future. You don't get paid a lot. Your housing is crap. Your travel schedule is crap. You play in a lot of crappy ballparks. So you end up spending a lot of time and money in a not great situation, or spending a lot of time and effort and money probably in a not great situation with a very, very small chance of success, which in these terms would be getting to the major leagues. Now, if you didn't play minor league baseball, if you were a coach, if you were a sports writer, if you did any other number of things that you might do instead of playing minor league baseball, your chances of success would be huge. And all the skills that you learned from playing, being an athlete and playing baseball could still be applicable. You would still know perseverance. You would still know how to keep yourself going when things are tough. You would still know how to be a team player. You would still know all these things. But you could potentially make more money, have a more secure future, all these kind of things. So the question becomes, and the problem with all this is, how do you know when to say, yeah, I'm done with this. I'm over this. This is too much, or this isn't going to work out the way I want it to. And that's the question, because from the time that most of us are kids, we're taught, you got to persevere if you have a dream. You've got to work hard. You've got to face challenges and overcome them. And we make this kind of almost a fetish in our culture that you have to have grit. You have to stick to it. You have to keep going despite the fact that sometimes it's really, really hard. And all those values and all those things you were told are good things. The problem is when you can't see the forest for the trees, basically. When you can't look at whatever you're doing and say, I really had a dream that I was going to be a concert pianist, but I can't span an octave. So as much as I would like this to happen, it's probably not going to. Or I really, really wanted to be a Major League Baseball player, but I've been in the minor leagues for 4 years. It's been a crappy travel schedule. I haven't made a lot of money. It's been very uncertain, and it doesn't look like I'm ever going to get my shot. Okay. And, then you get the people who will tell you, oh, you should never quit because, so-and-so was a journeyman actor for 20 years and then he got this role and then now he's a big star and he's making a ton of money. Or, so-and-so wrote 4 books and then their 5th book suddenly took off. And yes, there are stories, and everybody has to make that calculation for themselves. What am I willing to go through? What am I willing to sacrifice? What are my other options? And everybody will have different answers to that question. And you also have to remember that if you are doing something, or if you have a pattern of doing something, like me with the bad relationships, eventually you have to figure it out, you would hope. Eventually you have to look at the pattern and say, okay, this is not serving me well. This is not working for me. If I'm continually dating broken men who aren't really that interested in me, and if they're consistently treating me poorly, then there's something wrong with the choices that I'm making. There's nothing wrong with me. There's something wrong with the choices I'm making. And the reality is, if you want things to be different, you have to make different choices, and you have to accept that sometimes, particularly when it comes to people, I want to say here, because one of the biggest fallacies that, especially for a lot of women, is that we can change people, that we can make people be different. I grew up with an alcoholic father. a mother who had some issues of her own. But one of the messages that I got when I was a kid was, if you would just behave differently, if you would just be better, if you would just, not do these things that you're doing, which were perfectly normal things, FYI, then things would be different. Even though the reality was that I had nothing to do with what was going on in terms of why my father drank, why my mother did what she did, whatever it was. But I was constantly told. So I grew up and became a young woman thinking that I had the power with my behavior to make other people do things differently. If you are an adult child of an alcoholic, you may have similar theories. I hate to disillusion you, but the reality is that you can't change other people. Other people have to want to change themselves. And if you consistently find yourself in relationships where you're getting hurt, or you're getting taken advantage of, or you're being made to feel bad about yourself, then you need to take a look at those relationships and see if it's worth persevering. So, and Nikki, thank you so much for being here. And Nikki says, hey, Christine, we were just talking about that today, a group of us. Great topic. Yeah, it is an interesting topic. And like I said, thank you to Lisa Shaw for suggesting this topic to me. It's one that I'm finding really interesting, and I think it has a lot of value. And one of the reasons that I think it has a lot of value is that it's something that women, I think, have issues with in a lot of areas. It could be relationships, it could be business, it could be your job, whatever it is. It could be any of those things. And the reason why we have issues with it is women are taught sometimes to ignore the signals in their brains and in their hearts and in their bodies that tell them that this is not the right thing. We tend to ignore it, and we tend to think if we just gut it out, if we just keep pushing through this, we're going to end up achieving whatever the goal is. And it's hard to say this didn't work. It's hard to admit it. It's hard to say, I tried something and it didn't work out for me. I went into this relationship and it didn't work the way I wanted it to. I started this group, or I joined this organization, and it's just not doing what I needed to do. It's really hard to say that. And, like I said, with the minor league baseball players, you have a dream and you really want it to work, and you're really excited about it, and you're optimistic, and you'll take any small little glimmer of a sign that tells you that this is possible. And there's nothing wrong with that. We need that in order to start things. If we're pessimistic and assuming that everything is going to suck and we're going to fail, then nobody would ever start anything. So you have to have that optimism. You have to have the intermittent reinforcement where you get a little sliver of something good and you go, yes, this is working. You need all that. You have to have that. So I'm not saying don't start things. I'm not saying don't rely on intermittent reinforcement. I'm not saying don't stick to things and don't follow through on things. I'm just saying that, especially as women, we have sometimes been taught that our feelings, desires, wants, needs, whatever, don't necessarily matter. And that sometimes we will stick with things to our own detriment because we've been taught that's what we're supposed to do. And Sheila has a really good comment here. I like this. Sheila says, it can be pretty empowering to finally realize those things that don't serve you anymore. When I've gotten brave enough to cut things out like that, I find that other areas of my life find more success. Yes, exactly. When you realize that there are things in your life that aren't working for you for whatever the reason, and that doesn't have to be a bad thing. We also need to remember people grow, people change. The dream that you had when you were 20 is probably not the dream you have when you're 40. And the dream you had when you're 40 may not be the dream you have when you're 60. people change. When I was in my 20s, I fully expected that I was going to write the great American novel and live in a penthouse in New York and have fabulous friends and marvelous parties every night. Now, honestly, now that sounds like my idea of hell. But I was 20. So, what did I know? And I mean, writing the great American, well, actually, even writing the great American novel, I'm not so interested in anymore because fiction is kind of not where my interest lies anymore. But had I pursued that goal to the exclusion of everything else, I would perhaps be very unhappy right now instead of realizing that, okay, that was something that goal changed. That goal maybe wasn't the goal for me. Maybe there was another way to do what I wanted to do. And Carolyn says, and I like this too, making mittens was a classic life lesson. At some point, you have to stop if it's not bringing me joy, money, or family happiness. And this is very true. We all have the right to money. We all have the right to joy. We all have the right to happiness. We all have the right to career satisfaction. We all have the right to say, this is not working for me. This is not what I want to do, even if we've invested a ton of money and time and effort into it. And I don't know why this suddenly happened, but it did. So we have to remember that we are people with free will. We are people who can direct our own lives. And that's another thing that a lot of people will say, well, I can't leave the job because money, or I can't leave the job because I've been there 12 years. And if I stay another 3, I get a pension or whatever it is. You can do anything. I mean, yes, there will be costs. I'm not saying that there won't be costs involved in whatever you do, but you can do anything you want. I mean, okay, within reason. If you decide that you want to go shoot a bunch of people, you probably shouldn't do that. I'm sure that most people would appreciate it if, you didn't run around naked. But for the most part, if you think there's something that you want to do or want to stop doing, you can do that. Nobody is going. And you know what? The people that judge, and there will be people who will say, well, you invested all this time in this, and then, or, another favorite of mine is people who invest a lot of time getting a degree and then end up not using the degree for whatever the reason. Maybe they discover that they like the school part of it, but they don't like the actual work that is involved with doing whatever the job is that people with that degree usually have. Or they get involved in something else and it totally becomes the thing that they love that they never even knew they did. And there are always people who say, oh, you spent so much time getting this degree, and how come you spent all this time, blah, blah, blah. So what? You got the degree, you did persevere and get it. Maybe you end up not using it. You know what? Life changes. Things happen. So, and if you spent the time and you learned and you grew and you had new experiences, is that time really wasted even if you don't use the degree? Or even if you don't use the training, whatever it is? So there's a lot to unpack in this. And I realize in the short amount of time we have here, we're not going to cover all of this, but if I can at least bring some of it out, I would really be happy with that. And I like what Cindy or Nikki says here. Our roads change, they are meant to. If we always stayed the same, we would never grow and change. And I think, yes, that's exactly true. That we become different people at different points in our life. The person I am now would probably be almost unrecognizable to the person I was when I was 22. If we were, I'm 52 now. The person I am at 52 would probably be almost unrecognizable to the person I was at 22. For one thing, the 22-year-old would never be on camera talking to you guys like she knows stuff. So we change, we grow. What we want when we're 20 is not what we want when we're 60. And it shouldn't be. I really don't think it should be, honestly. So we fetishize this whole idea of you've got to stick to it. You've got to follow through. You've got to, despite all the odds, you've got to keep persevering. What happens when you're in a situation and you realize that this is just not doing it for you? And how do you figure that out? How do you know when you should keep going and when you shouldn't? Well, let's talk about that a little bit. The first thing to do when you're trying to figure this out is to get a grip on your emotions, because achievement and accomplishment and the flip side of that, which is failure, have a lot of emotional context. We want to feel good about ourselves. We want to feel good about our choices. We want to feel good about our decisions. There can be a lot of judgment if you're doing something and you decide it doesn't work for you, or if you realize that something that you started just isn't going to be what you wanted it to be. If you start a business and you realize that I don't really want to do this, or it's not going to work for the area that I'm in, or whatever it is, there'll be judgment because you invested time and effort and money a lot of times. If you're in a relationship and you realize that, hey, this just isn't working for me, and it could be because you made a bad choice, it could be because you and the person you're in the relationship with grew in different directions. It could be for any number of reasons. But there's still going to be angst and sadness and anger and all sorts of things that can be involved in the decision to stay or go, to quit or keep moving forward, whatever it is. So the first thing you need to do is sort out your emotions and figure out what's driving you in terms of, why am I staying? Why am I going? What do I think is going to happen? And also get a grip on your emotions in the sense of looking at what's the reality of the situation, and look at it analytically and not emotionally, which means, are there glimmers of hope in this situation? Am I getting intermittent reinforcement? Are there signs that, if you're in a relationship, are there signs that the person you're in the relationship with is willing to get therapy if they need it, is willing to contemplate changing, is willing to actually listen to your concerns or needs or whatever it is? All that stuff needs to be factored in. So emotions get in the way, and a lot of times emotions can keep you stuck to something that you should really let go, because you can totally love something and need to let it go. And that's a completely sucky thing. But it does happen. You can really love the business that you have and realize that it's not the right business for the area that you're in, or it's not the right business for you, or that maybe you're not meant to be an entrepreneur, which is no judgment. It's just some people are, some people aren't. You could be really, really in love with the person you're with, and it's just not right, or they have issues that you can't fix and they're not willing to fix. Sometimes you have to say, I love this thing or this person or this situation, but it's just not the right thing. Not an easy thing to do. So sometimes you need to set the emotions of it aside and just be analytical about it. And I want to look here before we get to the next one and see some questions or some comments. Ooh, Sheila, I love these big comments. My mom was one that always said that I had wasted my degree, but I know that's not true. I use the perseverance and tools that I learned and gained during college for lots of things now. But I can encourage my kids and their friends that those choices that seem so set for them now are flexible for their future. Teaching them to be okay with that is really important. Yes, and I totally agree with that. I started out my college career taking international politics and journalism. I thought I was going to be an international reporter, basically. I was going to be one of those guys in the trench coats wandering around in the war zones. Why I thought that, I don't know. But it made sense to me at the time. My degrees, some years later, ended up being marketing and business. Now, and I used those. So it turned out to be, it was a sensible choice. It was a more sensible choice than being a, international correspondent, a foreign correspondent, basically. So I think Sheila's totally right here that you can learn a lot of things just from persevering at something. If you get a degree, you gain skills while you're getting that degree, even if you never use that degree going forward. And I also think it's a good point that the choices you make don't have to set your future in stone. And I think that's another thing that we often kind of assume is that if I start this business, if I hate to say it, but if I marry this person, that it's forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. And, obviously you don't embark on anything thinking this is going to crash and burn and I'm not going to be tied to it forever. But I think that's a little bit more of a healthy mindset in a way, is that I will give this my all, but I also recognize that not everything is going to be the way that I thought it was going to be. And not everything is worthy of me sticking with it until the bitter end. So, and I like this from Carolyn too. The best moments of my life were the outcomes from the worst moment that brought the change. Yes, I would agree with that. That some of the best things I ever learned were from moments that were really hard, because I did learn that I can get through the hard stuff. And that's a valuable skill. But at the same time, I clung to some things far longer than I should have, my job at Enmart being one of them, because I had a lot of time invested and I was scared of what the possibilities might be. And I was scared of failing. I was scared of putting myself out there and having everybody go, yeah, we're not interested. So I clung to what I knew. Clinging to safety is another reason that a lot of people stay stuck, because this is familiar. And I've said it, and I have a friend who always goes, oh my God, I hate it when you say that. And he gives me shit about it all the time. But there is a value in the pain that you know, which is another reason I think sometimes that people stick with situations that are hard or painful, because at least you understand it and you know what to expect from it. And sometimes it's hard to believe that if you leave the situation you're in, that you aren't going to feel pain anymore. You kind of just come to assume, depending on the situation, that it's always going to be this way, that it's something about you that's making it be this way. So you have to factor that in too, which all circles back to, you need to take the emotion out of it sometimes. You need to be analytical about it and really say, okay, if this is me, what can I change in myself to make this not be happening? If this is not me, why am I still here letting these things happen or pursuing this situation that clearly isn't going to work out the way I want it to? So the next thing is motivate yourself. If you want to get out of a situation, motivate yourself to do it. And I'm not talking motivation like, if you stop doing this, you get a cookie. I'm talking about it in the sense of, figure out, again with the analytics, but figure out what the positive benefits could be out of leaving this situation. If you're in a business and the business isn't going well and you've done everything you could and you just come to realize that this is not going to work for you for whatever the reason. If you close the business, you stop spending money on something that isn't making money, you'll probably get rid of a lot of stress. You'll probably, well, not probably, you will be able to move on to other activities that could be more beneficial to you. So there's a lot of motivation to get out of a situation that's bad. If you're in a relationship that's painful or hard or isn't working out for whatever the reason, and this doesn't have to be a romantic relationship, it could be a family relationship, it could be friends relationship, could be a business relationship, whatever it is. If you look at it analytically, if you get out of the relationship, you're going to get rid of stress, you're going to get rid of sadness and possibly pain. You can look for people who suit you better. You can work on your own issues to make sure that these kind of relationships don't happen to you in the future. There can be a lot of benefits. So you really need to almost do a cost benefit analysis in a way to motivate yourself, to figure out, if I let go of this thing that I'm clinging to, that maybe the world or my brain or whatever it is telling me I need to keep doing, then what do I get? What are the possibilities? And okay, reality is there's no assurance, I guess is the word I want, that these potential things that you're thinking of will happen. But there's definitely an assurance that they won't happen if you stay where you are. So you need to figure out what will motivate you to get out of the situation that isn't working for you. And you need to figure out what will motivate you to stay as well. You know, what is motivating me to stay? Am I scared? Am I worried about the sunk cost fallacy? Is there just enough happening to make me think that this is still a possibility? Am I worried about all the money I've invested? Am I worried about people judging me? You know, what is it? Why are you doing this thing that isn't working for you? And I'm not saying this is easy. It's not. There's a lot of things wrapped up in deciding to stay or go in any situation. There's a lot of things wrapped up in admitting that you're quitting. Because, like I said, we fetishize the whole idea of keeping going at all costs and persevering despite all the odds. It's like, you know, one of our national ideals. And that's not a bad thing. It's just when you take it too far, you end up hurting yourself and you end up not benefiting from a lot of effort and time and possibly causing yourself harm. So you need to have the ability to figure out when to say when to decide that you're done. So the next thing you need to do if you're trying to decide if you're done is plan. And that means, if I stop doing this, what am I going to do? That may also mean, how am I going to stop doing this? And by plan, I mean, if I stop running my business, what am I going to do with inventory? What am I going to do for money instead? What am I going to say to the people who will judge me if my business fails? Do I have another business idea that I think would work better? If I'm leaving a relationship, whatever sort it might be, how am I going to let people know I'm no longer in this particular relationship? What am I going to say to the person who I was in the relationship with? What am I going to do to find new relationships that suit me better? What am I going to learn from this relationship? Do I need to go to therapy? Whatever it is. So what's your plan? How are you going to pull the plug? And the plan also is a way to calm or comfort the jitters or the fears that you're going to have from saying, I'm done, I'm quitting. Because like I said, there's a lot of judgment and there's a lot of kind of almost negative attention that can come to people who say, yep, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. The expectation is you will keep going forever and ever and ever if you're doing something. The expectation is that you should keep persevering regardless, even if it's not going well, even if it's not working for you, even if it's not necessarily benefiting you. And, you know, there are a number of people in the world who have made it their mission in life, sadly, to tell other people how they should live. I don't get that, but it happens a lot. So you need to have a plan for all that. Because the worst thing, not the worst thing, I think the worst thing is staying in the situation that you're in and realizing that it doesn't work for you and keeping going anyway. I think that's the worst thing. But maybe the second worst thing is just upending everything and not having a plan for how you're going to move forward. Because there's going to be some damage that comes out of, even if it's the right thing, even if it's, in your gut, in your heart, in your soul, in your brain, everywhere, that this is exactly what you should be doing. There's still going to be some emotional, I don't want to say damage, but there'll be some emotions. There may be negative feedback from people that you know. There may be things that you have to persevere against to make your decision work for you. So have a plan for that. What am I going to say to people who tell me I shouldn't do this? Do I care? Am I even going to answer them? Who's going to be on my side? Who will be my support system? All that sort of stuff. Because what you don't want to do is make a decision and then have emotional fallout from that decision that you haven't prepared for. Because there probably will be some. That's just the reality. I'm sorry, but it is. So having a plan can help. And the last thing, if you're looking at pulling the trigger, is use if-then thinking. And if-then thinking is basically, if I do this, then this will happen. Or if I do this, then this can happen, so to speak. So if I close my business, then I can start another business. If I decide that writing a book is not the goal that I wanted, that writing a full-length book is not what I want to do, then I can focus on writing short stories, which is much more what I prefer. So look at it again, analytically. And I know a lot of people's brains don't like analytically, but analytically is what it has to be, which is basically try to take the emotion out of it. Look at it from the standpoint of, if I do this, what do I gain? What is the benefit? Because if you can see that there's enough benefit to it, then and I hate this phrase, but it's the only one I can think of, the psychic costs of failing, of quitting, become more bearable a little bit. If you can see that if I do this, I can benefit myself in other ways. It's a hard one. I ain't gonna lie. And I feel like I did, quite a bit of reading and research in the last few days, and I feel like I've just scratched the surface on this issue. And I realized I kind of knew that was going to happen when this topic was suggested to me, because, I'm going to go about an hour, probably not quite an hour, because my voice is starting to go again, because talking for an hour is a long time. And this is a huge topic. Like I mentioned in the beginning, there have been entire studies done about what motivates us to quit or not to quit. And I do want to reinforce again, I'm not saying that persevering is a bad thing. I'm not saying that we shouldn't have perseverance, and we shouldn't have stick-to-itiveness, and we shouldn't try to make our goals a reality. I'm just saying that at some point, if things aren't working, or if there aren't signs that things will work, then you might need to look at whatever you're intending to do and decide if it's still the right thing for you to do. And that if you decide that it's not, if you decide that the business you started isn't working, or the relationships you're in aren't benefiting you the way you want them to, or they're making you feel bad about yourself, or whatever it is, and you need to end those things, that doesn't make you a bad person. That doesn't make you wrong. It doesn't make you haven't transgressed against some national, ideal. You just made a decision that was right for you. And I think sometimes people almost need to learn to be a little more selfish. And I don't mean selfish in, screw you, I'm going to do what benefits me and the rest of you can all go to hell, because that's not what I mean. But at the same time, I think, especially when it comes to women, we are taught to put everybody else's needs first. And sometimes we need to put our own needs first. And sometimes we need to acknowledge that what we need is something different than what we're doing. And there's nothing wrong with that. And that's really, I think, a skill that everyone needs to have. So if you're pursuing a dream, if you have something that you're trying to make work and it's working, great, keep going. But if you're in a situation where you're thinking, I don't know if this is working, or signs are pointing to it's not working, there's nothing wrong with sitting down, figuring out the realities of the situation, and maybe acknowledging that this is not the right thing for you to be doing. Simple as that. So, like I said, I know this is a very, very broad overview. I hope you all got something out of it. Thank you for your comments. I greatly appreciate them. Next week's show will be, I'm not sure yet, honestly. I'm talking to a few people about being guests. There might be a guest. It might be just me again. If anybody has any topics they would like me to talk about, I would love to hear them. Like I said, Lisa Shaw suggested this week's topic, and it turned out to be a really interesting one. And I think we had a lot of fun. So thank you all for being here. I really, really appreciate you taking the time to listen to me ramble on. And I will see you all next Wednesday. Bye, everybody.